Hello and welcome to Deception Diaries. Kevin Riley unlocked the front door, took off his shoes, and walked to the kitchen. He had just driven his wife, Carrie, to the airport for her bi-weekly, 3-day business trip. She worked as a secretary for Bradley Knox III, whom Kevin mockingly called Trey. Carrie always reminded him that her boss disliked him. "Kevin, Bradley can't stand you," Carrie would say. Kevin never admitted it, but he enjoyed using the nickname because he didn't like Bradley. Finding him insincere. Checking his watch, Kevin saw it was only 7:30 a.m. He had time for another cup of coffee and to check his email before heading to the store. Though not a big fan of computers, he used email to stay in touch with friends from trade school where he studied diesel mechanics. Now in his 30s, Kevin was one of 3 head mechanics at a heavy equipment firm. Despite his position, he still worked hands-on with his team. Although his job occasionally required overtime and travel, it was less frequent than Carrie's trips. She had been at Crosby & Knox for 6 months, moving up from a real estate clerk to a higher-paying legal secretary after completing advanced training. Kevin and Carrie met in college over 8 years ago and have been married for 6 years. They bought their house after saving up while starting their careers. Kevin had just started at the store and Carrie was a secretary at a local real estate firm. Their combined efforts allowed them to put a down payment on their home. After his coffee, Kevin went to the spare bedroom to use the computer, hoping it was still on since Carrie had used it earlier. He smiled at the screensaver photo from their vacation in Cancun, showing them tan and happy on a beach. He had wanted a more private photo as the screensaver, but Carrie vetoed the idea. Kevin clicked to remove the screensaver and saw an email from Carrie's work account on the screen. Curious, he noticed the word underwear in the email. Wondering why it was there, he realized their modem had likely malfunctioned again, as it often did, requiring a reset. Kevin jerked his hand away from the modem and froze, reading the email his wife received from her boss. The message was brief but devastating. "Carrie, I hope I catch you before you leave. I really want you to bring that black bra I gave you on our last trip with the teal accents. You didn't get a chance to wear it for me. My first meeting with the governor isn't until 2 p.m., so we might have time for you to wear it, and I took it off for you this morning, Bradley." He reread the email multiple times, but its meaning was clear. Carrie was having an affair with her boss, Trey. Kevin sat stunned, opening and closing his mouth like a goldfish. Finally he staggered to his feet and pushed his chair hard enough to hit the wall. Kevin remembered seeing the bra in Carrie's drawer when she packed, but now it was gone. Hoping it was a sick joke, he checked all her drawers, but the bra was missing. He recalled Carrie saying she bought it on sale at Victoria's Secret, but she had never worn it for him. Desperate for an explanation, Kevin sat on the edge of the bed, trying to rationalize the email. Carrie had always been loving and their relationship strong, with no signs of infidelity. He couldn't believe she was cheating. Kevin returned to the computer, hoping to find more information. He rebooted the modem and searched her email account. After scanning her inbox he found a folder labeled, "Personal," filled with messages from her boss. He opened the first message, reading it twice as his face turned pale. He printed the letter and called in sick to work, unable to focus. For the next hour Kevin read and printed more messages, forwarding copies to his personal email. As he finished, tears filled his eyes. He realized his marriage was over. After one last check of Carrie's email at Crosby & Knox and finding nothing else, Kevin logged out of her corporate account and switched to his own. He created a separate folder for all the forwarded messages and changed his password to keep them secure. Shutting down the computer, he took the printed messages and his now cooled coffee back to the kitchen. Grabbing a beer from the fridge, he sat at the kitchen table and reread the messages, surprised at how much they revealed about Carrie and Trey's trips to the state capital. Carrie had only been at her new job for a week when she was told she'd need to accompany Trey to the capital. The firm lobbied the governor's office and represented clients in state courts, so it seemed honorable at first. Kevin now realized Trey likely targeted Carrie from the start, with some trips being unnecessary for business. Carrie soon began volunteering for these trips, and Kevin suspected Trey seduced her on the second trip, if not the first. The first email in her personal folder was Trey's reply to her thanking him for a Gucci purse and a wonderful dinner, hinting at their night together. Kevin remembered Carrie showing him the purse, claiming it was a $40 knockoff from a mall kiosk. Her deception and ease in lying made him nauseous. The correspondence between Carrie and Trey was frequent, usually around their trips. Kevin discovered they stayed at the same hotel, booking 2 rooms, and Carrie would join Trey after Kevin's nightly call. Their jokes about his predictability hurt deeply. Kevin learned more about Carrie's deceit from other emails. For instance, the expensive diamond earrings she wore to the Christmas party were a gift from Trey, though she claimed they were cubic zirconia. Trey's thank you note for an extravagant gift from Carrie implied she went beyond mere gratitude. One email mentioned Trey's condominium, triggering Kevin's memory of Carrie mentioning her boss's place overlooking the river park. It seemed likely they met there during the day, under the pretense of work or during lunch, with Carrie careful to hide any evidence. By noon, Kevin had reread all the letters and knew he needed to decide what to do before Carrie returned with Trey. She usually flew in early Friday morning, taking a cab home and calling Kevin at work to confirm her safe arrival. Ironically, the biggest danger had already caught up with her while she was away. Kevin grabbed 2 more beers and stretched out on the living room couch, realizing almost 5 hours had passed since he dropped Carrie off at the airport to meet her lover. Kevin realized they must have planned this carefully since he rarely saw Trey when he took Carrie to the airport. Occasionally, Trey was in the departure lounge but always ignored them. By 6 p.m., Kevin was barely conscious, having visited the bathroom and kitchen multiple times to get more beer. When he went for another beer and found the fridge empty, he saw the 12 empty bottles on the table. He had finished both packs he bought the day before. Exhausted and having eaten nothing, he needed sleep. He managed to reach the bed and passed out fully clothed. At 10:15 p.m., the phone woke him from a haze of memories of happier times with Carrie. He guessed it was her calling to check why he hadn't called her at the Hyatt Inn. Everything he'd learned came rushing back, and he decided to wait until she got home to confront her. The answering machine picked up just as he answered. "Hello, is that you, Carrie?" "Yes, it's me," she replied. "Why didn't you call?" "You always do." "Is something wrong?" He heard concern in her voice and almost lashed out but held back. "I'm sorry, Carrie. I fell asleep." "What's wrong?" "You've never done this before," she insisted. Kevin almost confessed but instead said, "I had a couple of beers after work and I guess they knocked me out." He went on the offensive. "So how was your day?" "Busy this morning." "Hope Trey isn't too hard on you." Carrie hesitated. "No, I wasn't busy." "Why do you ask?" "You never ask about my work here." "Just curious." "How are things going for you? Are you doing well?" He pressed. "Of course. Why are you asking that?" She replied nervously. "Just kidding. I trust you completely." He lied. Carrie seemed uneasy. "Of course you do. You've never said anything like that before." "Forget about it. I didn't mean anything by it. I'll probably go to bed. The beer's making me sleepy." "Okay, Kevin, get a good night's sleep." "Love you." Kevin couldn't say those words back. "Okay, I will. Goodbye, Carrie." He hung up and went to the bathroom, then sat by the phone, waiting 15 minutes before calling the Hyatt Inn and asking for room 612. After a dozen rings, he hung up, not surprised when no one answered. He suspected they were making fun of him, planning to get him to call earlier. Realizing they were probably having fun without him brought tears to his eyes, and he stumbled back to bed. The next morning, he didn't feel too guilty about his overindulgence. After a shower, he felt well enough to go to work, but couldn't stop thinking about Carrie. He performed his tasks robotically, his co-workers noticing his distraction. Relieved when the day ended, he picked up burgers and fries on the way home, food he usually avoided, and washed them down with 2 beers. Knowing he couldn't drink like this every night, he left the second 6-pack untouched. At 8 o'clock, Kevin called room 612 at the Hyatt Inn, but no one answered after 10 rings. Based on previous emails, he knew Carrie was usually in the room from 9:30 to 10 o'clock for his nightly calls. Experimenting, he called every half hour, making his 4th call at 9:25. Each time, no one answered. Finally, at 9:45, Carrie picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Kevin, you're calling just in time. I was about to get under the covers but waited for your call," she laughed. "I didn't sleep tonight, Carrie, just watching TV and waiting to call you." "How did you spend your evening?" he asked, trying not to sound suspicious. "Same here, Kevin, just watching TV. Took a long hot bath earlier," she replied, seeming unaware of his suspicions. "That's good, you should be well rested for tomorrow night. We'll need to keep you busy when you get back," she giggled. "Already making plans, huh? I can't wait." After a few more minutes of small talk, Kevin ended the call. "I have a couple more things to do before bed, see you tomorrow." "Bye, sweetie, looking forward to tomorrow night, love you." Kevin hung up without responding. He waited another 15 minutes before calling room 612 again, and once more, no one answered after 10 rings. The next day, Kevin went to work but left early after lunch to be home when Carrie arrived from the airport. He knew they wouldn't spend the night under the same roof and was prepared for one of them to leave. Home by 1 o'clock, he waited patiently, feeling an emptiness inside but determined to maintain his dignity. Reflecting on their life together, all he remembered were the good times. The recent discoveries seemed unreal. He was at the kitchen sink when he heard the front door open and Carrie's luggage rolling down the hallway. She appeared in the kitchen, initially surprised to see him. "Kevin, what are you doing here? Why aren't you at work?" she asked, her surprise turning to concern. "I've been waiting for you, Carrie," he replied calmly, emotionlessly. "Why?" she asked, looking more concerned. Instead of answering, he threw a stapled bundle of letters on the table in front of her. She glanced at him, then at the papers, her curiosity quickly turning to shock as she read. Her face lost color as she skimmed through the pages. When she finished, she threw them back on the table and stood silently. "Well, you know," she finally said, "where did you get this?" "It's from my email at work. The modem broke and my email stayed on the screen, didn't it?" Kevin managed to speak calmly. "Yes, if it weren't for that, I probably never would have found out. You've been very good at keeping this affair a secret." Carrie said nothing more, took out her cell phone and started talking, her back to Kevin. "Kevin knows, it doesn't matter how." "Yes, I'll call a cab and meet you there, bye." Carrie turned slightly toward Kevin and said, "I'm leaving. I'm sorry you found out this way. I'll be back tomorrow for the rest of my things." She grabbed her travel bag and started to leave. Kevin, in disbelief, shouted, "That's it? No explanation? You're just sorry I found out this way?" Carrie replied, "What's there to explain? I've been with Bradley so much that being with him completely is just the next step. He's been good to me. You can't compete, Kevin, I'm sorry." Tears welled up in Kevin's eyes as he asked, "Is this about the money, the purse, the earrings, and other things?" Carrie hesitated. "Gifts are part of it. Bradley lives upscale and I'm ready for that life." She went to the bedroom, staying there for 5 minutes while Kevin tried to collect himself. When she returned with a garment bag, he heard the cab honking outside. Without another word, she left. Kevin followed her, watching the cab driver load her luggage. She got in, glanced back at Kevin, and he thought she might be crying. Alone in the kitchen, Kevin wondered, what the hell just happened? The next day, Saturday, Kevin was still in shock. Carrie called around noon, saying she was coming to pick up the rest of her things with her father. When they arrived, Kevin sat quietly on the couch as they moved boxes. After a few minutes, Carrie's father, Joseph Kane, joined Kevin. They sat in silence until Kevin asked, "Did she tell you what's going on?" Joseph looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Kevin. She seems to have made up her mind. We don't understand why she'd leave you for her boss." Kevin replied, "I guess it's what he can give her. She didn't say she loved him or stopped loving me." Joseph asked, "Does it really matter?" Kevin thought and answered, "No. She's been with him for months. I can't forgive that, even if she wanted me to." They sat silently until Carrie emerged saying, "I have everything I want. Do whatever you want with the rest." She had tears in her eyes as she carried a box outside. Her father followed with another. After they left, Kevin noticed some of Carrie's things still in the closet and drawers. He threw away her remaining clothes, makeup, and toiletries, erasing traces of her from the bedroom and bathroom. He spent the rest of the day lying on the bed, thinking about what he could have done and fantasizing about revenge. Eventually, he realized that although he was angry, he wasn't vengeful. He decided to focus on forgetting her, as difficult as that might be. The weekend passed in a blur for Kevin. He drank heavily, finishing all the beer he bought, trying to numb the pain of Carrie's betrayal. By Monday morning, he felt slightly better, coming to terms with the situation. On Tuesday, Kevin called Crosby in Knox to get a forwarding address for Carrie's mail. The receptionist said Carrie would email him the information. That evening, he received an email with Trey's 9th floor apartment address. Wednesday morning, Kevin was called into his office for a phone call. His bank informed him that his mortgage payment had defaulted. After a heated discussion, he discovered both his and Carrie's accounts were empty, with nearly $20,000 transferred out. Furious, Kevin went to Crosby and Knox, determined to confront Carrie and demand half the money back. He stormed into the office, bypassing the receptionist, and confronted Carrie loudly, accusing her of embezzlement. Bradley Knox III stepped out of his office briefly, before retreating and locking the door. Kevin turned back to Carrie, demanding his money. She handed him an envelope, saying he could have the car, house, and furniture. Kevin opened the envelope as security guards approached, warning him to leave or face charges. He left, calling Carrie a money-hungry cow and yelling at Trey for hiding. In the parking lot, Kevin examined the envelope's contents. It was a spreadsheet detailing their assets and liabilities. If he kept the house, car, and furniture, and she took the cash, their split would be equal. He realized, however, that selling the house would incur additional costs, not reflected in the spreadsheet. Kevin went to his bank and arranged a line of credit to cover the mortgage and other expenses until his next paycheck. He hoped he could manage the financial burden until he sorted things out. Kevin always relied on their savings to handle unexpected expenses, but now he knew it would take months to regain control. The next 2 weeks were a blur of emotions. The day after visiting Crosby in Knox, he received a letter warning him to stay away from Carrie and Bradley Knox III, or face molestation charges and a restraining order. Furious, he almost responded, but decided against it. A week later, Carrie filed for divorce using the settlement terms from the spreadsheet. After spending $200 and losing more hours of wages, a lawyer advised him that fighting it would cost more than it was worth. When not dealing with legal notices, Kevin's life slowly improved. 3 weeks after Carrie left, he realized he needed to erase her memories from his home. He removed her makeup table, rearranged the bedroom furniture, and redecorated the bathroom. Feeling better, he then tackled the photos. He removed pictures of her from frames, stored photo albums containing their memories, and kept only photos with friends and family. One evening, while looking through old photos, he found a picture of himself with Carol Reese, his high school friend. Wondering about her, he checked the phone book, but found no listings for her or her mother. Satisfied, he put the book aside. About 6 weeks after Carrie's departure, Kevin was interrupted from his late-night TV by a knock on the door. He was surprised to see it was Carrie's brother, Robert Kane. "Hello, Robert, come on in." "Didn't expect to see you," Kevin said. Stepping back to let Carrie's older brother in, Robert patted Kevin on the shoulder and said, "What's up, Kevin? I tried calling you, but your number's not in service. I switched to just using my cell phone to save money." Kevin led Robert to the living room. "Want a beer?" "Sure," Robert replied. Kevin returned with 2 open bottles, handing one to Robert. "So what brings you here?" "I wondered if I'd see you again after Carrie left," Kevin said. Robert shifted uncomfortably. "That's why I'm here. Carrie visited my wife 2 days ago. I told her what I thought about her cheating on you. Then she and Susan went to the kitchen to talk. I listened in from the garage." Kevin leaned forward. "What did she say?" "I'm still trying to understand why she left. She admitted she dumped you because she thought you wouldn't forgive her. She said, well, Bradley's gifts and lifestyle were great. You were better in bed. She was planning to break up with him soon if you hadn't caught her." Kevin sighed. "Would've, could've, should've. It doesn't matter now. She knows it's over and regrets it, but she's still pushing for the divorce," Robert said. "I heard her and Trey use the term starter husband. It sounds like she saw you as a step up." Kevin gritted his teeth. "Isn't that wonderful? Don't fight with Susan over this, Robert. I need to talk to her without losing my temper. My wife has a lot to answer for." They talked for another half hour before Robert left, adding a few minor details. Kevin fell asleep later, still thinking about being a starter husband. The next day, Kevin stopped by a grocery store to start eating healthier. At the checkout, the cashier recognized him. "Aren't you Kevin Riley?" she asked. "Hi Wendy, I didn't know you worked here." "It's been a while," Kevin replied. After paying, he asked, "You were friends with Carol Reese. Do you know what happened to her or her mother?" Wendy thought for a moment. "I heard she got married years ago. Her mother still lives in the same house, but remarried. Her last name is now Smith or something similar." "Thanks, Wendy," Kevin said, feeling a bit more at ease. Agreeing to meet for coffee sometime, Kevin and his old friend said their goodbyes. Returning home in a better mood, Kevin cooked a healthy dinner and went for a jog. Determined to make this his new routine, he embraced proper nutrition and regular exercise. After his jog, Kevin looked up Carol's mother's phone number and found it under Smithers. He called Mary and Smithers, who gave him Carol's number and mentioned that Carol was now a widow. Kevin noted Carol's address was in a low-income neighborhood and decided to call her soon. Over the next few days, Kevin's new lifestyle improved his mood, making him more positive at work. However, a short letter from Carrie disrupted his progress. The letter said, "I never thought of you as a starter husband," clearly influenced by Robert and Susan's conversation. Kevin replied, "Actions speak louder than words," but received no response. 3 months after Carrie left, Kevin received the final divorce papers. Surprised at how quickly Trey expedited the process, he celebrated with a single beer. He sent Carrie a final email. "You got what you wanted and never heard back." Later that evening, Kevin decided to call Carol Jansen. When she answered, she was glad to hear from him. They spent an hour catching up. Carol shared that her husband, Frank Jansen, was liquidated in Iraq, leaving her a widow with a 4-year-old daughter, Chrissy. She lived on a survivor's pension but planned to return to work as a therapist once Chrissy started school. Kevin shared details about his divorce. As their conversation ended, he asked Carol if she'd like to get together for dinner or drinks. Carol hesitated, explaining she wasn't ready to date and was focused on her daughter. Kevin, disappointed, wished her well and hung up. Feeling rejected and dealing with the finality of his divorce, Kevin grabbed another beer and went to bed, reflecting on an emotionally difficult day. The next 2 months flew by. Kevin settled into a routine, avoiding new relationships until thoughts of Carrie faded. He still thought about her often, but it became less painful over time. Kevin had given up his landline and premium cable to save money and now read newspapers left in the lunchroom by coworkers. One morning during a coffee break, a coworker handed him a newspaper with the headline, "One dead, one in critical condition." The article described a fatal accident involving Bradley Knox III and Carrie Riley. Bradley died and Carrie was in critical condition, with booze suspected as a factor. After reading the article twice, Kevin tossed it back. "Can't say I'm sorry he's dead. I hope Carrie recovers, but I don't care enough to worry." His coworker commented on how hard Carrie's departure had hit him, to which Kevin responded, "Reading that article proved to me I can move on. I don't feel the need to rush to her bedside." The article marked a turning point for Kevin. He felt a weight lift and realized he could move on. Over the next few days, news confirmed Bradley's DUI and Carrie's critical condition. Kevin invited a secretary over for dinner, enjoying her company and feeling ready to move forward. 2 weeks after the accident, Robert Kane visited Kevin. They sat in the kitchen with beers. "What brings you here, Robert?" Kevin asked. "Just in the neighborhood. Sorry about Carrie's accident." "How's she doing?" Robert explained Carrie's severe head injury and medication-induced coma. "It's hard on our parents. Thank goodness she wore her seatbelt. Bradley didn't and he paid for it." Kevin suggested suing Bradley's estate. Robert sighed. "Dad and I talked about it. We'll see after she's off the medications and out of the coma if she comes out at all." Kevin expressed concern. "Tell your parents hello. I've moved on with my life. I even had my first date in years. I'm sorry she was hurt, but I won't let it affect me now." They talked about sports and work, avoiding the topic of Carrie until Robert left. As he was leaving, Robert said, "Susan and I are doing better. She saw the mess Carrie was in and decided she's happy to be with me. Sometimes the grass seems greener, but it's not." "Glad to hear that, Robert. It was probably Carrie who influenced Susan. Carrie forgot her obligations to our marriage. It could have been worse. We could have had kids." They shook hands, and Robert left. Another 6 weeks passed quickly for Kevin. He heard nothing about Carrie and assumed she was recovering. Kevin started dating again, going out about once a week. He spent a few nights with Jean, the receptionist from work, and enjoyed their time together, helping him feel ready to date again. One Thursday evening, Kevin returned from his run and heard the doorbell. He was surprised to see his former father-in-law. "Come in, Joseph. What brings you here?" "I can't stay. I'm on my way to the hospital. We want you to visit Carrie with us tomorrow at 2 p.m. She just arrived this week." Kevin looked puzzled. "Why do you need me to visit her? Our marriage has been over for a long time. We'd just like you to meet us there. We'll talk then." "I'm in a hurry." "See you tomorrow," Joseph said, hurrying back to his car. The next day, Kevin rearranged his schedule, left work early, and headed to the hospital, snacking on fruit as he drove. He arrived at 2:30 p.m. and went to Carrie's room, feeling a bit nervous. He hadn't seen her since his angry visit to her office and hadn't exchanged emails in months. Carrie was asleep, her hair now only 2 inches long from surgery, with a visible scar on her head. She had an IV and heart monitoring equipment connected to her. Kevin decided to wait for her parents, feeling a mix of emotions. After a couple of minutes, Carrie woke up and smiled at him. "Kevin, you're here. Where have you been?" I've missed you these past 3 days. Taken aback, Kevin replied, I've been home and at work. Confused, Carrie asked, why weren't you here when I woke up? Why would you go to work or stay home when I was here? Kevin, feeling frustrated, said, we're divorced. You left me for your lover. Why should I visit you? I'm only here because your parents asked me to come. Her reaction surprised Kevin as she shrieked and tried to move toward him, becoming extremely agitated. No, 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 what are you saying? She cried, waving her arms and trying to free herself from the equipment. She ripped the 4 out of her arm, causing the infusion pump and heart monitor to sound alarms. 2 nurses rushed in. One asked, what did you do to her? Before restraining Carrie, Kevin replied, I didn't do anything. I was just standing here. Carrie mumbled incoherently, trying to break free. The second nurse said, I'll get the restraints and call the doctor for sedation, and left. Kevin walked out, shaking his head. I think she's crazy. As he reached the elevator, Carrie's parents arrived. Before they could speak, they heard screams from Carrie's room and saw a nurse rushing in with restraints and a syringe. Carrie's mother asked, you didn't talk to her, did you? Kevin nodded and she exclaimed, good God, no, rushing past him. Kevin, bewildered by the situation, watched for a moment before pressing the elevator button. As the doors closed, he saw Carrie's father looking for him. Kevin waved a farewell and left. Relieved to start the weekend early, Kevin drove home, reflecting on the strange events. Deciding to forget about it, he concluded that Carrie's psychological issues were best left to her parents and doctors. After showering, Kevin thought about calling Carol Jansen again. If she refused, he would call Jean from the office. Almost hanging up as the phone rang, he was surprised when Carol answered. Hi, Carol, this is Kevin Riley. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. No, I'm glad you called. I tried to contact you but your number wasn't working. I wanted to apologize for being harsh last time. I only use my cell now. No need to apologize. I was calling to see if you'd like to have dinner tonight or tomorrow. Carol hesitated. I have plans with my mom and stepdad tomorrow and I couldn't find a babysitter for Chrissy tonight. Why not bring Chrissy with us? I'd love to meet her. Carol laughed. Have you ever taken a 4-year-old to dinner? It limits restaurant choices. Let's pick a family-friendly place. I'd really like to take you out. Carol finally agreed. There's a restaurant Chrissy likes with a great dessert bar. How about that? Perfect. I'll pick you up at 5. Just tell me where it is. Carol was excited. Are you sure about taking Chrissy? Absolutely. If she's anything like her mother, it'll be a pleasure. Pleased with the plan, Kevin felt optimistic about the evening. They bantered until Carol had to get ready to leave. Kevin was thrilled, happier than he had been in a long time, and hoped their evening would be everything he envisioned. Later, lying in bed, Kevin replayed the details of his date with Carol and Chrissy. He smiled, pleased with how well it went. He looked forward to Sunday morning having agreed to join them for church, not for the sermon, but to spend more time with Carol and Chrissy. He remembered picking Carol up and being struck by her beauty. Her short dark hair suited her, and she seemed taller and more confident. Chrissy, a miniature version of Carol, had dark hair and eyes. Kevin was initially worried about how Chrissy would react to him, but those fears vanished when she held his hand as they walked to the restaurant. Dinner went well, with plenty of conversation. Chrissy often interrupted, asking about words she didn't understand, which Kevin found amusing. After dinner, he and Chrissy prepared desserts together, solidifying their bond. After a pleasant evening, Kevin walked Carol and Chrissy to their apartment. Chrissy's need for her mother's attention prevented any goodnight kiss, but Kevin was content. On Sunday, after church and brunch at IHOP, Carol dropped Kevin off at his house. Chrissy reminded him of their zoo plans, and Kevin reassured her, promising not to forget. As he exited the car, he noticed his former in-laws at his door. Carrie's mother, Nancy, looked upset. "We need to talk to you, it's very important." Kevin invited them in for coffee. Once seated, Nancy explained, "Carrie is in a terrible state. Since your visit, she's been hysterical whenever the sedation wears off." Kevin asked, "What does this have to do with me?" Nancy replied, "We wanted you to meet with her neurologist first. He could explain her condition to you." Kevin apologized. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. But what difference does it make? I hardly said anything to her." Nancy whimpered, and her husband took her hand before she continued. "The problem is, you told her about her affair and the divorce. We wanted to avoid that until she got stronger." Kevin, puzzled, asked, "Why wouldn't I mention her affair and divorce? She can't think I'd forget. Trey's pass away doesn't mean I'll take her back." Joseph explained, "Carrie had a severe head injury, damaging part of her temporal lobe, causing retrograde amnesia." "Amnesia, but she recognized me and you both," Kevin said. "She hasn't lost all her memory. She's missing the last year and a half and some earlier periods. She thinks you two recently returned from Cancun. The doctors believe she might recall more over time, but it's uncertain. So she doesn't remember the divorce or the affair. Lying to her isn't an option, and she won't get a free pass just because Trey is gone," Kevin responded. Joseph continued, "We don't need to lie. Telling her falsehoods could create false memories. We need to give her small pieces of truth to help her fill in the gaps." "So I shouldn't have told her about the affair and divorce?" Kevin asked, "Not exactly. The doctor advised giving her bits of information gradually. You overloaded her, which might have triggered some memories, but we don't know how much." Nancy, regaining composure, said, "She's not strong yet. Your news upset her. They're starting her on new medication and we hope to discuss everything soon." Kevin felt ashamed. "I'm sorry if I made things worse. I didn't know her condition." "It's okay, Kevin. We hope you can help her by triggering her memories. We'd like your photo albums. The doctors say pictures might help." Kevin stood and looked out the window. "I can't help with the albums. They're gone. I threw them out months ago." Nancy, puzzled, asked, "What do you mean?" "I mean they're gone. I deleted the pictures I wanted and threw out the rest. I offered them to Carrie but she wasn't interested." Joseph and Nancy were shocked. Kevin added, "I have some other things that might help. Give me 15 minutes. Kevin returned with a stack of papers and a CD. "Here are the letters I used to discover the affair. Maybe they'll help Carrie remember." He placed the stack in front of Nancy, who reached out to read them. Kevin quickly took them back. "There are explicit passages. Consider yourself warned if you decide to read them." He added copies of all the legal letters, including the warning letter, after his visit to Crosby in Knox. The last item was a CD labeled Cancun. Handing it to them, he said, "These pictures are all I have left of our time together. They include photos from a nudist beach. Carrie should probably look at them alone." Carrie's mother folded the papers and CD. Kevin hoped it would help Carrie. They sat in silence before Nancy said, "I don't think you'll want to talk to Carrie about everything that happened." Kevin replied, "Not right now. If she wants to talk after reading this and realizing what she did, call me. And I might consider it." Her father asked hopefully, "Could you consider starting over with her?" Kevin shook his head. "I can't risk that. She chose Trey's wealth over me. I can't believe a blow to the head changed that part of her. Even if it did, I won't take the chance." Joseph and Nancy understood but thanked him for his willingness to talk later if needed. As they left, Carol and Chrissy arrived. Chrissy excitedly told the older couple, "We're going to the zoo to see the elephants." The Canes greeted them warmly before driving away. Apologizing for not being ready, Kevin invited Carol and Chrissy inside while he changed. Soon, the happy trio headed to the zoo. Another month passed, and Kevin was happier than ever. He saw Carol and Chrissy weekly, though they couldn't turn their relationship into a lovemaking one due to Chrissy's presence. Carol suggested getting a babysitter for their next date, and Kevin eagerly agreed. On their date night, they watched a movie and danced at a bar with Carol's mom babysitting Chrissy. Returning to Kevin's house, they enjoyed wine and danced to his CDs. After a few sweet kisses, Kevin picked up his cell phone. "What are you doing?" Carol asked, smiling. "I'm starting to like this already." Kevin pressed a finger to her lips. "Give me a minute, I want to talk to your babysitter." Carol, shocked, tried to grab the phone. "Don't bother my mother." "Why are you calling her?" She stopped struggling when she heard Kevin say, "Everything is fine, Mrs. Smithers. I was hoping Carol could stay a little later." "Good, that sounds wonderful." Kevin paused, then said, "I like the way you think, Marianne. I'll handle the sheets. Goodbye." Ending the call, Kevin laughed. Carol, confused, asked, "What was that, Kevin?" Kevin laughed and said, "I'll tell you what we talked about. I think I'm going to really like your mom. She and I have always gotten along great." Carol, still confused, asked, "What did she say?" Kevin explained, "Your stepfather Gary joined her at your apartment. Chrissy is fine and sleeping, and your mom and Gary are doing the same thing there that we were doing here. He had a doctor's appointment today and brought some blue pills. Your mom insists you stay here tonight because they're using your bed and don't have pajamas." Carol, shocked, said, "My mom would never say that. What are you trying to pull?" Kevin laughed. "They were enjoying your wine and Gary got your mom tipsy. She thinks we're good together and wants you to stay with me. She even said to make sure the sheets are changed in the morning." Carol, blushing, said, "I find it hard to believe my mom said that." Kevin kissed her and said, "Don't forget to change the linens in the morning. Your mom wants us to meet them for brunch at 11 a.m. at IHOP with Chrissy." At 2 p.m., Kevin lay on the couch, reminiscing about the wonderful evening with Carol. When they arrived at IHOP, Marianne, Gary, and Chrissy were already there. Both adults smiled and Chrissy laughed and waved. Kevin joked, "Sorry we're late, I had to do some laundry," making Carol blush. During the meal, they joked about blue pills, sheets, and wine, confusing Chrissy. Later in the parking lot, Kevin kissed Carol and Chrissy and hugged Marianne. He whispered, "Thank you for your suggestions. It was the push we needed." Marianne whispered back, "You two are good together. Gary and I took the opportunity to test his prescription." She laughed and walked to the car with Gary. Kevin waved as they drove away, smiling when his phone rang. Thinking it was Carol, he answered, "Hi Kevin." Recognizing Joseph Kane's voice, Kevin replied, "Yes, it's me. What can I do for you, Joseph?" Joseph said, "Carrie wants to talk to you. She's staying with us and asked if you could come over for coffee. She's afraid you'd hang up if she called." Surprised, Kevin hesitated. "I guess I could, I have no plans today. Should I come over now? We'd appreciate it." "Okay, I'll be right over." As he left, Kevin wondered what Carrie wanted to tell him. As Kevin walked into his former mother-in-law's house, he recalled all the pleasant times he'd had there. But this visit felt different. Carrie wasn't home yet, so Joseph and Nancy asked him to join them in the kitchen. After pouring coffee, Joseph said, "Nancy and I will let you and Carrie talk alone. We'll be in the living room." They left just as Carrie walked in and sat across from Kevin. Kevin was surprised by how good she looked. Her hair had grown back and was styled, but she seemed thinner and had dark circles under her eyes. She looked nervous, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. Kevin broke the ice. You seem to be recovering well, Carrie. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you coming on such short notice. I hope it wasn't inconvenient. It's not a problem, Carrie. How's your memory? Are you starting to remember things? She shook her head. I only remember a few things from the last year and a half. At Crosby & Knox, the receptionist helped me recall some details, but it's been frustrating. Kevin asked, are there things you want me to help you remember? Carrie smiled. I have a few questions. Susan helped me understand some of what I did. She kept dabbing her eyes. Kevin said, ask me anything, I'll be honest. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. If I hadn't seen the letters and talked to others, I wouldn't believe I did those things. Kevin remained silent, unable to say it's okay after all he endured. Carrie continued, I have vague memories of Bradley and none of our times together. I don't know what I saw in him. I visited his apartment and if my clothes and belongings weren't there, I wouldn't believe I lived with him. After a pause, she asked, how did you find out about my affair? I know it involved email, but I don't know how. Kevin explained how he discovered the first message, which led to others. She pulled out the stack of letters he had given her parents. He described how the mention of lingerie caught his attention and the lies about the purse and earrings. Carrie looked horrified as he recounted her deceit. When he finished, they waited in silence while she wiped her eyes. When she finally composed herself, she said, forgive me for lying. I know it seems easy for me to say, but I truly mean it. A few minutes later, she asked, can you tell me about the letter where Bradley and I joked about my chauffeur? Kevin sighed, I wish you hadn't asked. You were joking about me. Every trip to the state capital, I drove you to the airport and carried your luggage, including the expensive lingerie for him. You both thought it was funny. You even joked about getting me to call your hotel room early in the evening. He described how he always called around 9:45, proving she wasn't in the room before or after his calls. He was visibly upset, and Carrie started crying again. After a couple of minutes, she said, I'm so sorry, Kevin. I can't understand how I could have done that. Kevin took a long sip of coffee. It's all in the past now, Carrie. I still get upset, but I've had time to get over most of it. The conversation shifted to her medical condition. She explained she was having infrequent seizures and doctors were trying different medications to control them. Emotionally, she couldn't handle work and had resigned from Crosby & Knox. Her parents were consulting an attorney to sue the insurance company and Bradley's estate for her injuries. After about 15 minutes of small talk, Kevin said it was time for him to leave. Carrie quickly asked, do you think we could go on a date? I know you'll probably never forgive the new Carrie who betrayed you, but I'm the old Carrie again. I don't remember cheating on you. Maybe if we went out to dinner or another date, you could fall in love with the old Carrie again someday. She spoke quickly, hoping to get it all out before he could interrupt. Kevin considered his response carefully. I'm sorry, Carrie. To me, there's no old or new Carrie. There's just the one I loved and then lost to Trey. It took a long time, but I've moved on. I know that's not what you want to hear, and I'm sorry. As he spoke, she began to cry quietly. When he got up to leave, she asked, did you find someone else? He hesitated, unsure how his answer would affect her. I think so, Carrie, I think so. Is it the dark-haired woman with the little girl? Kevin was surprised. Yes, that's her. How did you know? My parents saw her at the house and told me, Carrie said, still wiping her eyes. Finally, she added, you deserve someone who will treat you better than I did. Then she turned and ran out of the room. Kevin left the room and was gone long before Carrie's parents realized he and Carrie were no longer in the kitchen. A month later, on a sunny Saturday afternoon in April, Gary and Kevin used a rented truck to move Carol and Chrissy from their apartment to Kevin's house. Things were going so well between them that they decided to see if they were meant to be together. Chrissy was excited to have a yard to play in and her own big room. Kevin's computer had been moved to a corner of the living room, and the room it was in was now freshly painted and decorated for a little girl. There was a large box in the garage with a child's play set and swing set waiting to be assembled. The three of them began to attend church regularly every Sunday, and soon Kevin noticed that Carrie's parents didn't attend the same church very often. He didn't give it much thought when, 4 months after Carol moved in with him, the minister announced that they were getting married this coming Saturday, and that anyone from the congregation was welcome to attend the wedding. They decided that a small informal wedding was what they needed, and chose their church rather than City Hall for the ceremony. Chrissy was thrilled to be her mother's only flower girl, and that she would soon have a new father. Kevin was quick to let her know. "Frank Jansen will always be your father, but I'll be happy to be your father too." He and Carol agreed that Chrissy would keep her father's last name, even if they made a legal adoption. Kevin insisted that the sacrifice Frank had made would not result in him losing his only child. Kevin and Carol spent an hour on the phone with Frank's parents, explaining their upcoming wedding and their plans to keep Chrissy in the Jansens' lives. The conversation ended with a promise to visit Chrissy's paternal grandparents for a week for the rest of the summer. Kevin couldn't wait to meet them, and they decided that this trip could be their honeymoon. Their simple wedding ceremony went off without a hitch, and friends and family gathered at the church. It was obvious to some that Carol was pregnant, and Chrissy made sure that everyone in the church knew that she was having twin brothers. It was hard to tell what Chrissy was more excited about, the impending arrival of 2 brothers, or the fact that Kevin was now her father. A week later, when Kevin was changing the exhaust system before a trip to visit the Jansens, he ran into his former brother-in-law, Robert Kane. He was surprised to learn that Robert and Susan had accompanied Carrie to the wedding the previous week. They had only stayed until the end of the service, as Carrie had found it much more difficult to be there than she had expected. Kevin, for his part, had a hard time understanding why Carrie would come to his wedding. Why did she want to be there? "I know how upset she was when I told her about my affair with Carol. Seeing us get married must have kept her busy," he said. "Now she's trying to get over you as you are over her," Robert replied. "She thought that watching you get married would make it easier for her to move on with her life. It bothered her a lot, but she said she was glad she went." The men continued to chat until Robert said, "I almost forgot to tell you. Carrie's claim against Bradley Knox's insurance company has been settled. Since it looks like she won't be able to work again, she managed to get almost $2 million. Part of the deal was getting his apartment, so that's where she lives now. We couldn't figure out why she wanted to do this, but she said she hopes living there will help her regain lost memories. Personally, I don't think that's likely. The doctors believe she has recovered everything possible. I'm afraid constant reminders of that idiot won't be good for her mental state considering he's dead. You're remarried, and she only remembers the good times with you. I think it's a mistake." 2 years flew by for Kevin and Carol. Their 2 sons, Frank and Kevin Jr., were joined by a younger sister, Chrissy. They named their daughter Marianne in honor of her grandmother. Their house was beginning to feel cramped for their growing family, and they were already debating whether to add an addition or buy a larger one. They hadn't made a decision yet, figuring they had another year before they would be forced to make a choice. It was a quiet Friday evening when the phone rang, and Carol picked it up. After a moment, she called Kevin to the phone. When he picked up, he was surprised to hear that Joseph Kane was calling. "I had to call you, Kevin, so you wouldn't find out about this tomorrow from the paper. Carrie is dead. Robert found her when he went to see her today. Apparently, she died sometime yesterday." The news took Kevin by surprise, and he lost control of himself for a moment. His reaction was enough for Carol to realize something was wrong, and she stepped forward and took his hand in hers. Her reassuring touch and concerned look brought him back to the present. He was happily at home with Carol and their children. His brief reaction was caused by a flash of long-forgotten memories of Carrie, memories he knew could never be completely erased. He smiled encouragingly at Carol, then said, "I'm sorry to hear that, Joseph. I would like to extend my sincere condolences to you, Nancy and Robert. Do you have any idea what happened to her?" Joseph hesitated before answering. "I'm afraid she liquidated herself. She left a note for my mother and me, but it's mostly personal things meant just for us. She wanted us to tell you that she never stopped loving you. Apparently, she tried but was never able to get rid of the memories of you. She also wanted you to know that it wasn't just you. She had ongoing health problems, both physical and mental, and they played a part in it too. I didn't know she had so many problems. I haven't spoken to her since the day I came to your house to see her. I'm very sorry to hear that something like this happened. If there is anything I can do to help you or Nancy, please let me know." They exchanged a few more familiar phrases, and then the conversation ended. A few days later, Kevin and Carol attended a memorial service for Carrie, where they were able to express their personal condolences to her family. From Crosby and Knox, only her friend Anne, the receptionist, attended. A few months later, Kevin learned that he was the heir to $500,000 from Carrie's inheritance. Most of her estate had gone to her parents and brother. Kevin and Carol had long debated whether to keep the inheritance for themselves. Kevin worried that it would bring back constant memories of Carrie in their lives. In the end, they kept it and set up 4 trust funds for their children's education. The balance was used to buy a new, larger home. They found that they often remembered Carrie and her generosity, but it didn't give them any trouble. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.